Some of you might have seen the pattern blouse number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. At least on my knitting internet, it's incredibly popular right now and I'm seeing it all over the place. I don't want to knit it for reasons I will get into soon, but in the process of looking at alternatives, I did a fair amount of research and thinking, and so I thought I would just quickly put together a video about it. So welcome or welcome back. This is Garden Variety Knits and I am Kelsey. Today is a little bit different. Most of my videos are a bit more of the traditional kind of project updates sort of chat. But today I basically have a pattern roundup for you. So the context is that I am looking for something to knit for my first time working with the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, the legend. I have heard about this since the beginning of watching knitting videos, obviously, but I hadn't even seen it in person until a month ago. And I don't know, there's something so appealing about it, and it really does feel quite different to the touch than like a plant or a animal fiber. Like, it is a little bit different and I'm pretty excited to try it out. And on top of that, there's this pattern that's been living rent-free in my brain, which is of course the blouse number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. So when I first saw this pattern, I actually don't think I liked it. It was like, my immediate reaction was that it was a little bit too plain and I wasn't a fan of the high neckline. And I kind of thought that it only looked good kind of posed in certain ways and on a very specific body type with quite like square shoulders. And that's all fine. And in particular, I feel like those boat necklines, I have to be careful what I say because it's in fashion right now, and so I'm sure that many people have been making something with a boat neck. But personally, I don't know, I think it highlights just a little insecurity I have about like having a neck that kind of comes like hunched out a little sometimes, or in certain contexts, like when I'm knitting. And I feel like that looks particularly bad coming out of a boat neck. And also it's just not particularly anatomically helpful. Like, it does sit quite high on the front of your neck, and then sometimes can leave a bit of the back of your neck exposed unless it's shaped really well. So I'm just personally not a fan of wearing boat necks. I don't like having something up that high, and I don't particularly love the look. But I mean, like I say, this pattern's been living rent-free in my head, and it's because, you know, I've started seeing it everywhere and it's definitely grown on me. I don't know if this happens to other people, but you kind of suddenly you change your mind about something and you really want it, even if you didn't love it to start with. And then 2 things in particular definitely changed my perspective on it. And one is the Woolly Workers finished object that she made a video about recently and posted on Instagram, which just suits her so well, and it really shows off the pattern, I think. And then the other one was, I'm pretty sure, but I can't be certain, that I saw someone wearing one out in the real world. Anyway, there was a girl who was wearing a very similar, if not the same, in like a dark kind of forest green, and it suited her so well. Like, it just looked so elegant, and all of the kind of plainness and, like, you know, it's a rectangle of stockinette kind of. When I saw it in movement on her, I was suddenly like, oh, that's so elegant and, yeah, pretty. So that kind of suddenly made me go, oh, okay, I want that. But I've been recently knitting the Me Oh My tee by Park Williams, and I've been doing that in Drops Bell, which is a DK. And I don't think that DK anything that thick on like a non-wool is for me, quite honestly. It feels clunky and sloppy. I don't know. I don't think I can do it. And it also feels heavy and like thick. And I mean, I think that, so for context, the blouse number 1 is knit in 2 strands of Knitting for Olive Pure Silk. So I guess that's probably a light DK. I can't remember what it says on the pattern. In general, if I'm looking down, I'm referencing my Ravelry. Yeah, so Ravelry says it's an Aran because it's using 19 stitches, 27 rows per 10 centimeters. And I think it's mostly knit using 5mm needles by the looks of the gauge instructions. So that's quite chunky actually, even though it looks quite elegant. And I really think that for my summer knitting, I'm just enjoying fingering weight knits. Obviously that's easier for gamisoles because it's a lot less knitting to do than it is for a long sleeve blouse, but for something as special as like buying pure silk yarn, I feel like I'm probably willing to put in the extra effort to knit it up at a smaller gauge and just spend more time on the item that I'm making. Yeah, just quickly to talk about my yarn, this is the famous Dusty Artichoke. I was initially inspired by that forest green on the girl I saw, but I couldn't see one in my local yarn store that was kind of a match, and just looking at the shades, I felt like this one was most likely to be something I reached for and that kind of suited me and still felt like a bit special compared to like a true neutral. And I have 4 balls, which quite honestly probably won't be enough, but I was going off one particular pattern's yardage, so yeah, with 4 balls that gives me 1,000 meters, because it's 250 meters to the 50-gram ball. So back to the reasons I'm probably not going to knit the blouse number 1. So yeah, one is that it holds this double, and so it's a thicker fabric, heavier fabric. Even though the yarn is quite lightweight, I still think it'll be, obviously it'll be twice the thickness, twice the heaviness as if I held it single. And then the other reason that I don't particularly want to knit this pattern is that it, I don't love the neckline, and I've also seen on some of the photos that the armholes look a little bit deep, which it just looks a little uncomfortable, especially if you're going to move your arms around, lift your hands, and I think that it maybe, I'm not totally sure, but I just wonder if like moving around in real life it'll look a little bit less elegant than in the posed pictures. So one thing that really goes against that is that the person I saw in real life, and then like I say, Venetia's from the Woolly Worker, I think fit quite well. So maybe it's also just a matter of the different sizing, like it's not that the armholes aren't that well graded or something. So maybe if I make quite a small size, I wouldn't have that problem, but it's just not a risk I kind of want to take. So yeah, I think I have decided that I will take the inspiration of wanting a long sleeve blouse in silk, but I am going to leave this particular pattern. So that got me thinking about alternatives. So I've made a Ravelry bundle that I will link below if you're interested in having a look through these patterns, but there's 8 of them, so I will run through those. And I might run through kind of in reverse order of how likely I am to actually use them. But yeah, I was just kind of casting around for fingering weight t-shirt patterns that I felt that ideally were knit in a plant fiber or silk originally. And so I felt confident that the drape of silk would work on them. And I wasn't at all picky about whether they were originally long sleeve patterns, because I figured that I can make the sleeves long. But I am being a little bit picky about kind of the fit of the armholes, although I have noticed that that's not totally true, so we'll get there. So a couple of kind of outside contenders are from Jessie Made Designs, the So Summer shirt. And as I mentioned, I'm probably not, this is probably one where I wasn't selective enough about the arms, because this is originally a very short sleeve t-shirt, and it actually is a drop shoulder, and I'm actually not sure that that's the look that I'm going for with the blouse. Like, part of what I like about the blouse number 1 is those kind of clean shoulder lines down the tip of the shoulder. So what drew me to this one is probably the neckline, which felt like it was, it had the clean edge naturally, because I think it's just a raw edge, that was reminiscent to me of the blouse number 1, but without being a boat neck and without being so high. Like, it had a little bit more of a relaxed fit. And yeah, I felt as though it also was knitted to have kind of drape. One thing that's interesting is that, so it is using a fingering weight yarn, and I think it was originally 60% cotton, 40% linen was the Undine yarn that it was designed for. So it's a little bit of a looser gauge. I think it's using 3.75mm needles for a fingering weight yarn. But that gives it really nice drape. And yeah, I mean, on the model, it's kind of got quite a lot of positive ease. I feel like if I lengthened it a little and then, then the question is what to do with the sleeves, because as they are written, they're quite large. And so to lengthen them, they would be very voluminous. And I do quite like the look of the fairly slim ones that are kind of on the blouse number 1. They do have a very slight bell sleeve on them, but definitely the upper arm is meant to be a little more fitted. So I would probably have to modify that part of this design. But I did like the neckline, and that was kind of what I was most tempted about. So the second pattern that I'm considering is the Slightly Sassy V by Amy Sher. And I think that this one is beautiful, and I probably will knit it one day, but I think it's just not actually fitting this vision that I have because of the V-neck. And I also think that I know that it's a compound raglan, but I do think that the raglan lines on it also just don't completely match what I'm envisaging. I say that, but then one of my highest contenders is a raglan, so maybe I'm just not totally sure what I want. But then another mention goes to another Amy Sher pattern, which is the Colouring Book Tee, which has ribbed details, but I would probably replace them with either raw edges at the cuff of the sleeves, and maybe at the bottom of the top, but maybe an I-cord on the neckline. I'm not sure. One thing I am really concerned about when I think about the neckline is how close fitting it is, because if I'm not doing ribbing, it's going to be completely inelastic, so I just need to be sure that it's going to be able to get over my head. And in particular, if I add something like a I-cord, which could bring it in a little bit, I'll have to be very careful about not making it too small. But yeah, the Colouring Book Tee is beautiful, and I know that one of the samples is knit in the pure silk, so that should work. The gauge for this one is 24 stitches and 32 rows for 10 centimeters, and that's actually the same as the Slightly Sassy V, so they have the same gauge. Yeah, so it's just a slightly tighter stitch gauge than the So Summer's shirt, but same row gauge actually. I haven't swatched, so I don't know what gauge I'm going to be getting with different needles for the silk, but I'll work that out. I mean, these are all probably close enough that I believe I can make it work. Yeah, so I think that the Colouring Book Tee is a contender, but I'm a little bit unsure about the raglan and the neckline. And the next option that I'm looking at is the Feels Right Tee by Lily Kate France. And this one really has, because it's got this satin sleeve, I think it's worked with short rows, or maybe it's done, yeah, it looks like you pick up and work it with short rows, like work a sleeve cap. And it's got like waist shaping by the looks of things, so it definitely has the fitted kind of look, and it's got quite a high neck, but a crew neck, I think, rather than a boat neck. So it definitely has that kind of like clean rectangular look to it, if I imagine like removing the neck ribbing and maybe having a raw edge there or I-cord. But again, I'm super worried that this neckline is too small. In fact, I don't even know how, like, she knit this in cotton. I don't even know how she got it so that it was stretchy enough to fit over her head without just bagging out over time. That would definitely be a concern for me. Like, this neckline just looks a bit too tight to knit in a completely inelastic yarn. Yeah, even with ribbing, like the cast on would have to be elastic, but especially if I omit the ribbing, I'm very concerned about this. So for this one, it's more that I just don't know if I can make it work. The gauge on this one is a bit tighter. It's 26 stitches and 34 rows per 10 centimeters. It was knit in a pure cotton fingering yarn, by the designer. So yeah, we'll see. This is also fully size inclusive though. It starts at an 80 centimeter and ends at a 162 centimeter bust. And then one other little thing I noticed about this pattern is that the sleeve caps, as well as being shaped with short rows, it looks like they've got some decreases on them as well to just really make them hug your arm, which looks really nice. So it's definitely something I'll keep an eye on knitting at some point, but yeah, I think for this one I am just a bit hesitant about the neckline. Okay, we couldn't really do this without some petite knit patterns. I actually don't know if I've knit any of her patterns, but you know, they're famous, you know, and she's very prolific, so it was likely that I would come across a couple that would fit the bill. So the first one is the Cloud Tee, which is designed for fingering, but I think she's done it in tin lina, which is cotton, viscose and linen. So I guess she definitely thinks about it working for a plant yarn, but she also recommends the compatible cashmere from Knitting to Olive and a Filcolana Merci, which is 50% cotton and 50% merino. So it looks like it's kind of designed for a real variety of fibers. So this one is similar to the blouse number one because it has kind of a slightly rolled edge, but a more aggressive rolled collar. Which, I mean, in the photos definitely looks very flattering. I don't know how much I like a rolled neck edge, personally. It looks like the two samples that she's got pictures of, there's one that looks a bit more dense, which is the compatible cashmere, which is held double because it's a lace weight yarn, and that looks beautiful. But then there's also definitely a drapier look with the tin lina sample, which I think are the ones she's photographed here on the beach, if you are looking through. So I think the rolled neckline looks a little bit, to me, a bit better on the plant sample than on the cashmere one. Maybe just because it's a little bit less dense of a fabric, so it's rolling a little less. Again, this is a drop shoulder kind of construction though, and I don't know that that's what I would want with a long sleeve kind of blouse style. So yeah, I'm not totally sold on this one. And I don't know if I mentioned, but the gauge on this is much tighter, 28 stitches and 40 rows per 10 centimeters, and that's on 3mm needles. And then the other petite knit pattern that I was looking at was the Cumulus O-Neck Tee. Gosh, there's so many Cumulus patterns. Cumulus Tee O-Neck. So this one is designed for tin lina or the Knitting for Olive silk. And it's a similarly tight gauge, 28 stitches, 40 rows per 10 centimeters, and I think again that's on 3mm needles. So this one does actually feature I-cord at the edge, which I think looks good, and in some ways that gives me confidence that if I have a wide enough neckline, an I-cord like edging will look clean and nice and be the look I'm looking for. As I mentioned before, I don't know whether or not a raglan is exactly, well, there's just something about this raglan in particular that isn't maybe doing it for me. Yeah, but this is definitely a contender because it's designed for the yarn. Lengthening the sleeves is almost not a mod, and it definitely, it fits, it looks beautiful. Like, I think this would really work for what I'm thinking. So yeah, it's still on the cards, I would say. Okay, and now down to the last two, and so second to last is the Tombo Tee by Florence Miller, which I think, so this one is a bit different from all of the others because it's a saddle shoulder construction. She designed it for stripes, but I would be able to not have stripes, I think, quite easily. And it's also designed to have rib details, but I don't think that is something I would have to do. It's designed for Pasquale Safira, which is a 75% merino, 25% silk. So I guess that she probably had a bit of stretch in hers, but I have seen a couple of examples in the projects of people knitting it in pure silk, so I'm pretty confident that that would work. Her gauge is 27 stitches and 40 rows in 10 centimeters, again knit on 3 millimeters, so very similar to petite knits. I think that this one is definitely a strong contender because the shape of the shoulders and the sleeves is just, to me, very elegant. Like, it does kind of create that rectangular look in the blouse number 1, but without that really high boat neck. I'm also anxious with this one about the neckline. I think if I kind of visually imagine removing the ribbing, it's probably a big enough neck hole, but I would have to play around with it. I believe this one is knit top down, so I can cast that on and then test it pretty quickly. So that's something that I'm definitely considering. I also already own this pattern, which is a big plus. So yeah, I would say that this, to me, it looks like it'll give the right look. Like, I can be fairly confident. I do remember trawling the projects for this to see if I could find anyone who had modded the neckline into an I-cord, and I don't think I did. But again, I could probably just cast it on and see if it is a weird shape and if that kind of can fit over my head. And if this one did work, then I think I would also feel more confident about the Lily Kate France Feels Right tee as well, because that's probably a similarly high neckline, although I think that has even less ribbing than the Tombo Tee. Okay, and then my final pattern, and I am quite drawn to this one, is the Farfa top by the Knit Pearl Girl. So this one is, the recommended yarn is the pure silk, so that's already good, and the recommended gauge is 27 stitches, 34 rows. I think she said she used the 3.5 millimeter needles, but that she knits quite tightly, so feel free to adjust. So yeah, if petite knit is getting 28 stitches on 3 mil needles and she's getting 27 on 3.5, I don't know. I mean, she definitely has a looser row gauge, so maybe that's more what I should be looking at. Anyway, one of the major features of this top is these kind of sleeves that have a lot of volume and, you know, kind of go like halfway down your arm. Although there's two samples, one that kind of goes to elbow length because there's 2 tiers of increases, and one that goes more to like mid bicep. But I love the look of this as written, but you know, I also can see potential in it for it to make the blouse that I'm picturing. And then the other detail that I really like is that the neckline is already I-cord, and then it also has this adorable little tie at the back, like a keyhole, which I just think is an extra little detail that I like, especially if I was to remove the sleeves. So I think also just looking at some of the pictures, and yeah, just trying to guess, it looks as though the sleeve opening, like where it like separates from the body, is actually a pretty fitted maybe size, and then it, because of the rapid increases, it gets really big. But if I didn't do those increases, I suspect that the proportions would be really quite good on the sleeves. This one is also a raglan. It may be a compound raglan, I'm not totally sure. And I don't know if I'm just being fooled by the modeling or if it's because of the wider neckline, but to me, it doesn't bother me quite as much that it's a raglan somehow. I do think, yeah, maybe it is something to do with the neckline. Like, the Cumulus O-Neck is very similar, so I don't know why that one doesn't draw me in as much. But yeah, if I compare it to the colouring book tee, that one, somehow the neckline combined with the raglan doesn't look quite as good. Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Maybe it's all just in the photos and the posing. I'm not completely convinced why I am more drawn to this one, but it definitely, I see more potential in it than I have in some of the other raglan patterns. Yeah, and so I'm actually at this point a little bit undecided. I was hoping that making this video would really help me decide, yeah, how best to proceed. But I mean, one thing I could definitely do is basically swatch for the Tombo Tee by casting it on and checking that the neckline would fit over my head, and just seeing how that looks to me, especially ahead of actually buying the Farfa top pattern. Oh, just quickly, the yardage that I would be looking at for the Farfa top, apparently it's 1,000 meters in the first 3 sizes. And my logic, which now that I look at these sleeves probably is not so good, was that because I have less volume but I want more length, that somehow my yardage would be equivalent. I don't think that's true. I think I'm probably going to need a 5th ball. And for the Tombo Tee, obviously I need quite a lot more. The meterage that Florence lists for the first 3 sizes is sub 1,000, but then obviously once I want to lengthen the sleeves, yeah, I'm very likely to need an additional ball there as well. So I might have just underbought, but yeah, we'll see. I'm unlikely to make this a super cropped top, but I probably still want it to only like get down to my hip bones, because anything too long and I really have trouble styling it because all of my bottoms are high-waisted. I haven't really reached a conclusion at the end of this, but I would definitely love your input. I'd be really curious which pattern you would go with, and yeah, if my opinions match yours. So also, if I've missed any patterns that you think would really work, please let me know. I'm unlikely to have completely made up my mind in the next week or so, so it might come in time, or I might keep it in mind for a future project. Yeah, I think that's all I have today, but thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and if you like generally knitting kind of content, I do put out, like I say, those kind of project update videos, so feel free to subscribe, like this video if you found it useful, and yeah, leave a comment if you've got anything that you want me to hear, or anything I've missed as well. I should have all the information in the description box, along with links to the patterns and the bundle, and I will have tried to add a lot of like photos and information on screen, but anything that you're not sure about, yeah, just feel free to ask. And yeah, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on what I should do, and I also look forward to using this yarn and showing you all what I make in the end. Cool, I hope that you have a great rest of your day. I will catch you